Inviting me to share a few words with you. I want to thank Peter Savetta, Megan Wood, Corey Saxum, and everyone in the Office of Undergraduate Research. I wasn't sure you'd recognize me because I wasn't asking for money today. When I think back on my 7 years here at Northwestern, OUR really puts a smile on my face. And pardon me, I'm going to gush about this office because I really feel a lot of gratitude towards them. This office has been a lifeline for me in helping to support my undergraduate students, many of whom are Pell Grant recipients and work study recipients, and really need the kind of financial support that OUR has offered. And I want to talk about some of the research that I've been able to supervise because of OUR and tell you a little bit about what my students learned, what I've learned, and what some of them are doing now, because I'm very proud of them. My first experience was with Isabel, who is a member of the Keweenaw Bay Ojibwe community in Upper Michigan, in the Upper Peninsula, who grew up in Milwaukee, as I did. Isabel helped me with my Tribal Youth Media Workshop. And in Tribal Youth Media, Native teens explore their cultural and natural landscapes by interviewing elders and community members and integrating traditional ecological knowledge with scientific ecological knowledge. They do this and produce short documentaries, which are shown in the community and live on YouTube. So Isabel helped with the research and made connections with the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission. And that association led to a number of internship opportunities, job offers, and further research on wild rice, which Glyphwick helped her with. And I think she'd agree that her experience with OUR strengthened her self-confidence, strengthened her connections to Wisconsin Native communities, strengthened her research skills, and strengthened her overall sense of cultural identity. Interestingly, the last week that Isabel was with me at Bad River, she got to talking to some of the community members and found out that she had relatives there. Well, they were my relatives. And so we compared our family trees, and she sent a couple of messages, to her parents and said, send me, is Henry Denemy one of my, and turns out we're cousins. So Native people like to say we're all related, but in this case, I really am related to Isabel. She and I are cousins, but I feel more like an auntie to her. I'm really proud of this young woman who's now an Ojibwe language and culture apprentice at the Indian Community School in Milwaukee, which is a staff position there. She teaches language and culture, and she's really put her degree from the School of Education and Social Policy to work, along with her experience, I think, with Native youth on some of the Native reservations that she and I visited. Then there was Elena, a young woman who rolled up her sleeves. She looked a little bit like Rosie the Riveter, and that was her personality. Amazing. She worked with me on a National Park Service grant, which incorporated Tribal Youth Media. It involved 3 communities: Bad River, my community, Red Cliff, and the Lac du Flambeau Ojibwe communities. It involved collecting oral history surrounding the Apostle Islands National Lakeshore. The Park Service was interested in learning how the Ojibwe traditionally, well, and still do, use the islands in the Apostle Islands chain for traditional hunting, fishing, and gathering. And so the kids in that year's Tribal Youth Media Workshops conducted videotaped interviews with tribal elders. We were also connected because this was the year that Indigenous communities really started talking about data sovereignty. I don't know if you're familiar with this term, but since Europeans landed on this continent and began interacting with Native people, they began collecting and writing and observing, and Jesuit relations back in the 1600s, and later government statistics and observations, and all of that exists in the National Archives, and much of it has been interpreted in ways that Native people don't even recognize. And it's it's our information, but we don't have access to it. And for many years, and I'm glad to say that I don't think Northwestern does this now. For many years, I think academic institutions really had an exploitive, extractive relationship with Native communities. Go in there, collect research, write books, extract, and nothing, there was no reciprocal agreement. There was no sense of reciprocity. So this indigenous group that we were connected to, in conjunction with a First Nations group in Australia, developed this tribal archiving system called Murkutu. And it's super complicated. It has all these levels and firewalls to protect sacred knowledge from getting out into the public, but allows access to knowledge that the community is willing to share with outsiders. But it's super complicated. And Elena did all these tutorials and connected with the app developers and developed this interactive PowerPoint with simulations, and then taught Mukatu to these ancient women in tribal communities in a way that showed so much grace and patience and understanding. And she has such a humble way of interacting with community members. By the end of the summer, she was so integrated into and beloved by community members in all 3 communities that I heard one of the elders say, "Oh, that's Elena. She's that cute Ojibwe girl that was working with Patty Loew." Elena wasn't indigenous, but by the end of the summer, she was. So Elena's degree in journalism from the Medill School and CESP, where she received a certificate in civic engagement, landed her a position in the U.S. Department of Justice as a paralegal in the antitrust division. And I just received a letter from her the day before yesterday saying that she had been admitted to the Northwestern Law School on a full scholarship. So I'm really super, I'm getting goosebumps. I'm really so happy and proud. So my next OUR funded research assistant was Nancy, a journalism major who was interested in the First Nations food sovereignty movement in Vancouver, British Columbia, where her family was from. She had a huge challenge because her research assistantship happened during the pandemic, which was a challenge for everybody, but OUR still was funding research. It just had to be research that could be done remotely on Zoom. So this is a particular challenge in Indigenous communities because so many of our communities were not then and still aren't connected. We're just not wired. And I think when last I checked, only 67% of Native communities have broadband access. So, yeah, let's interview people who are growing food in the middle of nowhere or operating food trucks. Well, she really had trouble finding people that she could connect to on a remote basis. But so she had to go beyond Vancouver. But she was able to conduct interviews with a First Nations food truck vendor, a restaurateur in Vancouver, and a chef who, a Six Nations chef in northern Wisconsin, and turned those 3 interviews into 3 podcasts, which were so insightful because this is so much more about, it's so much more than just food. Here's a sample quote from one of the chef that she interviewed. "We have our traditional ways. We have ceremonies for harvesting, for planting, for the different gifts that were given. And it's important to maintain those values when we're looking at food security because it brings us back as a whole person." So, the interviews that she did were so wonderfully composed, and she developed a really nice relationship with the people that she was able to interview and got some really interesting responses that give us windows into these communities and the way people view their food. And and help us understand how food can teach us. But food isn't just food. In many communities, food is relative. You know, wild rice, in my community, we talk about wild rice as the relative. If you go to Oneida, as many of my undergraduates have gone with me during the harvesting season, and we're picking and shucking and braiding corn and talking to the elders, and you see them refer to their lovely white corn as a relative. And so I really appreciated Nancy's research because her research really helps us understand the relationships, the special relationships that people have with their food. So Nancy's finishing her academic career at Medill in our journalism residency program, where she's an audience engagement intern for Cityside in Berkeley, a nonprofit media organization devoted to local journalism. And then there's my latest research assistant, Katie, another Keweenaw Bay descendant and a third-year journalism student. Caden is helping me on Ice Worlds, which is a multifaceted multimedia project involving a giant screen film, a PBS series, and tribal youth produced short documentaries about how their communities are facing climate change challenges. Not so much focusing on the fear and anxiety about what those changes might bring, but really on the way these communities are innovating and creating and looking at climate change in unique ways. And it's a reminder, you know, that yes, you know, I tell my journalism students, there is a lot of historical trauma in Native communities, and you need to tell those stories in an authentic way, but don't define us on our, you know, on our deficiencies. We didn't survive because of generational trauma. We survived because of generational innovation and creativity and ingenuity and joy. Much like one of the poster sessions, I love the fact that there's an emphasis on joy. You know, that's part of the life experience as well. So we have these films created in 4 tribal communities by youth, and the adult film. That's kind of sounds like I'm on a corner slinging my bag of nickels. I need to come up with a different term for that. The general interest film that will screen in IMAX theaters and science museums next year. The films produced by my tribal teens will also screen at the same time in science museums in their area, and they'll introduce their films and conduct question and answer sessions about them. So the 3 communities, I'm so excited about this research. The first community we went to is Quinault in Washington State, which is a community that is sliding into the ocean because of rising seas. They're also in a tsunami zone. One of the challenges that Quinault is facing is the Anderson Glacier, which moderated their salmon river, totally melted 5 years ago. And so now their river is changing course, and islands are disappearing, and it's moving too fast, and the salmon lay their eggs and they get washed out into the ocean. So their salmon fishery, which was one of the most amazing on the planet, is now really diminished. So what the Quinault are doing is they are bolting together massive root balls and concrete chunks of stuff and sinking them in the rivers where the elders tell them salmon used to spawn. They're sinking them in the rivers, putting dirt on top and planting Sitka spruce and Douglas pine and growing new islands. And you know, it's working. The salmon are coming back. They're spawning in these side channels. And to me, I mean, what a great story. You know, and I see that more and more, that Western scientists are kind of looking to us now. I mean, we've been around since the last ice age. We know a thing or two about climate change. And so it's nice that people are finally coming to us and asking, yeah, how about those salmon? So yeah, just grow new islands. That's the answer there. And the teens did a really beautiful job of telling that story. At Bad River, the teens on my reservation did stories about black ash and efforts to preserve black ash in the face of emerald ash borers, wild rice restoration, and my community, which is facing an Enbridge pipeline right now that is on our reservation, and the easements ended in 2013, and we're trying to get them off the reservation. It's not like on disputed treaty lands, it's on our reservation. And it's one thing to, to be opposed to fossil fuels and this energy system if you're part of the system, if you're part of it. And so we have used our COVID money to build 4 solar, big solar farms on the reservation. And now our health clinic, our wastewater treatment center, our fish hatchery, and our administration building are now solar powered. And the plan is to have 15% of houses on the reservation solar powered by the year 2025, which is, soon. It's our tribal council tells us it's a realistic goal. So those are the stories that were done at Bad River. Caden and I just came back from the Porch Band of Creeks in southern Alabama, where they are trying to restore longleaf pine forests. At one time in the southeastern part of the country, 98% this was an area that had lots of pine. Now 98% of that pine is gone. And these forests are so important to keystone species like the gopher tortoise, which is this big tortoise that burrows into. Okay, all right, okay. Well, it burrows into the ground, and prescribed fires are an important part of the ecosystem. And when the creeks set these managed fires, all the animals head into these gopher tunnels, these tortoise tunnels. It's a really interesting thing. Okay, so there we. Okay, all right. If it sounds like I'm bragging about these incredible researchers, I am. Caden, after his research assistantship, he wound up being labeled, he wound up being selected a Udall Scholar, the very first Native American student here at Northwestern to get that honor. He was selected last week as a Native American Journalists Association 2023 fellow. So I'm proud of them, and I'm so grateful to the Office of Undergraduate Research for believing in them, for supporting me and other faculty who depend on our young helpers. I feel blessed that I can help them during the summer and that they're learning professional skills and gaining life experience and confidence to become teachers at the Indian Community School, to get into law school, to help local journalism. I have no idea what Caden is going to do, but I know he's going to be amazing. And I'm really appreciative, Peter, of the partnership that CNAIR formed with OUR in developing research protocols and methodologies for people that want to do research in Indian country. So I just want to send out my gratitude out there to the ether, to all the people that work in the office who support students and faculty members, to the undergraduates that I've been blessed to mentor, to all the Native communities that have welcomed my students and me into their homes and organizations. And I really believe that the research that we've done has made a difference. In some cases, I think it's improved the quality of life in Native communities, but it certainly exists as a historical record of the communities that we've worked in that will live on in multimedia. So miigwech, che miigwech, that's thank you very much. And miyu, that's it.